Hi, I'm Ed Bacon, the Rector of All Saints Church, Pasadena. Whoever you are and wherever you find yourself on the journey of faith, I hope that you'll find something here that speaks to you. Welcome.
Okay, everybody, we're going to begin. Thank you very much for being here. We have red welcome bags for those of you who are visiting. We'd love for you to have these bags. They contain current information. We'd love for you to know that we have a special small group going on about one of Professor West's books. You can sign up for this at the table. We have an action table here so you can take a stand against incarceration, private incarceration, against juveniles, and also for comprehensive immigration reform. We would love for you to stop by the action table. We also would love for you to pick up books today. Our guest preacher, Serene Jones, the president of Union Theological Seminary, her book, really a knockout book, Trauma and Grace, one of the most transformative books I've ever read, is for sale. Please avail yourself of that. And we have five Professor West's books for sale. The Rich and the Rest of Us, Brother West, Living and Loving Out Loud, Cornel West, Democracy Matters, Race Matters, and we have one that he didn't author, but he's probably going to reference today, The New Jim Crow, about mass incarceration by Michelle Alexander. We have two groups ongoing now studying this book, and we want mass incarceration and the New Jim Crow to be a part of the household vocabulary of people who worship and come to All Saints Church. If you would like to be on a mailing list for knowing what comes into this room, into this well, please, we have clipboards over at the table, the welcome table, so you can sign up and get an email blast from me every Thursday about what's coming up. Our speaker this morning is a prominent, provocative, democratic intellectual. To be sure, one of the most important public intellectuals of the world today. He is professor of philosophy and Christian practice at Union Theological Seminary and professor emeritus at Princeton University. He's also taught at Yale, Harvard, the University of Paris, and All Saints Church, Pasadena. Which is just as important as those other places. Graduated magna cum laude from Harvard in 3 years and obtained his MA and PhD in philosophy at Princeton. He's written 20 books, has edited 13. I've just shown you 4 of them, very important ones. He made his film debut in The Matrix and was the commentator with Ken Wilber on the official trilogy released in 2004. By the way, I had my first music video that we've been watching up here. And I hope that you'll go and enjoy it at YouTube and also at the 1 Billion Rising website. Also, our speaker has made 3 spoken word albums, including Never Forget, collaborating with Prince, Jill Scott, Andre 3000, Talib Kweli, KRS-One, and the late Gerald Levert. His spoken word interludes were featured on Terence Blanchard's Choices, which won the Grand Prix in France for the Best Jazz Album of the Year in 2009. The Cornel West Theory's Second Rome, Raheem DeVaughn's Grammy-nominated Love and War, and on. But you want to listen to him. So, I do need to say that unfortunately his flight itinerary demands that he leave this room right at 11. He will not be able to sign books. But we are going to be bringing him back every year as long as we possibly can. Will you now please warmly welcome Professor Cornel West?
My brother, good God Almighty. What a blessing to be back at All Saints Church. All Saints Church, my dear brothers and sisters, looking well. Brother Ed Bacon Jr., James Edwin Bacon Jr., he is my brother. He's got a sweet soul. He's got a sharp mind, and he puts his body on the line. Give it up for Brother Bacon. Oh, yes. Oh, indeed. Each time we come back to All Saints Church, it really is like a homecoming. Isn't that true, though? Our dear Sister Serene Jones, who's the president of Union Theological Seminary, she gave such an amazing sermon. How many were there? How many heard that sermon? God is not ugly. Come. And Sister Nichelle, who works at Union as well, give her a hand. Wave your hand, Sister Nichelle. One of our magnificent deans there. And I know Sister Melissa's around and Brother Bob is around as well. We got a Union crew this time. And we have given our word that we plan to return every year, because when we return primarily to learn and listen. When I come to All Saints, my soul is touched by the Eucharist and the ritual. And I need soul nourishment because the battlefield is intense. And the despair and despondency and wrestling with the edge of life's abyss is very real for a Jesus-loving free black man like me in America. And I need to stay close to the cross. Oh, yes. I'm old school gut bucket kind of Christian. I'm ecumenical in practice, but in the end, Jesus keep me near the cross. Given what's coming, I see Brother Joseph there, one of the great scholars of our day in both comparative religion as well as critical theory. It's so good to see you. And there's so many others. I'm going to be very brief. And Brother McGuire and Sister McGuire, oh, these are two special ones. Union Theological Seminary would not be what it is without your leadership. But I'm going to be very brief because I'm here primarily for call and response. I'm here for critical exchange and dialogue. We need to pull from each other, keep each other accountable, answerable, and responsible. No one of us have a monopoly on the truth. And you can look at me and you know I don't have a monopoly on beauty. That's all right. I'm still my mama's child and my daddy's kid. And I'm made in the image of God. That's why I always have a smile on my face. Because if you all knew the love that went into me through Irene and Clifton and Shiloh Baptist Church and Glenella, the chocolate side of Sacramento, you'd understand what my smile is all about. I got so much deep love injection that it can never be suffocated. And that's why I was moved by that 13th chapter of 1 Corinthians. Because I decided a long time ago to stay on the love train that Curtis Mayfield talked about when he sang People Get Ready. Oh, yes, the love train of the Isley Brothers, that caravan of love train of the OJs. Those are not just songs. Those are existential declarations of a certain way of being in the world. And I come from a people who've been Jim Crow and enslaved and despised and devalued, who dished out to the world the love supreme of John Coltrane. And dished out to the world the love essays of a James Baldwin. How is it that these particular people so hated mustered the courage and the imagination to still dish out love figures like Martin King and Toni Morrison and a whole host of others? And of course, we black folk have no monopoly on it, but I always begin on the chocolate side of town. Because I begin with my mom and my grandmother and my grandfather. And that love spills over to vanilla suburbs. My precious white brothers and sisters, it spills over to reservations. And our indigenous brothers and sisters don't have to be in the room for us to be hypersensitive to their suffering and what they have undergone and the dignity of their resistance. It spills over to Latino brothers and sisters in barrios and other places. It spills over to Asian brothers and sisters. It's a human thing. It spills over to what's going on the West Bank of Palestine. It spills over in Tel Aviv with my Jewish brothers and sisters, both Palestinians and Jewish brothers and sisters, precious and priceless all the way down. It spills over to Ethiopia. It spills over to Guatemala. It spills over to El Salvador, on to China. That's the kind of praxis that I've tried to imperfectly enact based on what took place this morning. the legacy that flows out of that Eucharist and that first century Palestinian Jew named Jesus of Nazareth. And we all fall short, but we all try to raise our voices. And I want to highlight, my dear sister Michelle Alexander, buy this book first. The other text can be tertiary. I want you to buy this text. She was kind enough to ask me to write the introduction. She's one of the great public intellectuals, but she is a witness bearer and a truth teller. And she begins by talking about a crime against humanity. Now, I want to express my solidarity with my sisters dealing with 1 billion rising. Violence against women is a crime against humanity, a cowardly brothers engaging in that kind of wounding and scarring and bruising of women of whatever what color. But the same is true when you talk about the new Jim Crow. It is, in fact, Jim Crow Jr., and the same with Martin Luther King Jr., Fannie Lou Hamer, Rabbi Abraham, Joshua Heschel, and so many others tried to break the back of Jim Crow Sr., but we still got Jim Crow Jr. around. Don't get seduced by the relative progress. Don't get seduced by the parade of successful Negroes at the top. That's a beautiful thing. They wouldn't be where they are if folk through blood, sweat, and tears had not sacrificed. But there's so many still stuck in the basement. And if you look at the world through the vantage point of the least of these, through the vantage point of those stuck in the basement, whatever society we're talking about, then the new Jim Crow ought to be viewed as what it is. It's a criminal system that in some way still too criminal. We talked about solitary confinement this moment as a form of torture. I don't want to hear from elites that torture is over just because you eliminated waterboating. No, that's not true. It's not true at all. There's other forms of torture still at work, Guantanamo and in prisons in the United States. I'm told Harry Belafonte threw down the other night. He's a truth teller. He's got a lot of Paul Robeson in him and a whole lot of other voices. He never forgets. He remembers the scars, but he doesn't allow the scars to have the last word. The last word is always love. Oh, yes. The last word has to be love. Because if it's all just about analysis, if it's all just about appearance, then it's still sounding brass and tinkling cymbal. It's got to have deep love in it. It's not just about justice. The great Reinhold Niebuhr used to remind us what any justice that is only justice soon degenerates into something less than justice. Justice must be rescued by something deeper than justice. That's the love. And justice is what love looks like in public, but justice is not identical with love. The love is that irreducible stuff that keeps spurting out no matter what circumstances. You could find it in the concentration camps of our Jewish brothers and sisters against thugs called Nazis. The love was still spurting out. You couldn't completely suffocate it, even given the indescribable evil. That's true on the plantations too. It's true with our immigrant brothers and sisters wrestling with low-wage jobs. It's true with our sisters dealing with male violence. It's true with our gay lesbian brothers and sisters dealing with oftentimes insecure straight brothers and sisters. True with our precious elderly who oftentimes are cast in the net of invisibility as they're no longer as productive economically as they once were, but all of their wisdom and sagacity oftentimes push to the margins given our obsession with youthfulness, oftentimes too often identical with childishness. And not childlikeness. Sense of awe and sense of wonder. When you talk about the new industrial complex, you're talking about 2 generations nearly destroyed in black and brown poor communities because it's not just mass incarceration. In many ways, it's class incarceration too. And everybody knows if it were happening at the same level among our middle class whites, it would be a major crisis in the culture. If it was happening among middle class black brothers and sisters, we'd have a different kind of black leadership. It wouldn't be invisible. Even our politicians would be leading the way. But that's not the case when it comes to our poor brothers and sisters of whatever color, but disproportionately chocolate. And the same is true in terms of our drones. Oh, you can't talk about the criminalization of a younger generation. You can't talk about torture as a form of militaristic response to behavior, punitive disposition toward behavior, without talking about the militarism abroad. And if as a nation you think that you can bomb your way out of a crisis, dropping bombs on innocent people, every bomb dropped is a scar on the soul that's left in America. And the bombs that are dropped in Pakistan and Somalia and Yemen, they land in East Los Angeles. They land in South Central Los Angeles. And yes, they land in Pasadena too. It may not be as direct as you think, but sooner or later we're going to reap what we sow. Oh, sooner or later chickens will come home to roost. Sooner or later what's in the wash going to come out in the rinse. Don't think that somehow you can just live a life of evasion and holding at arm's length the evil and the narrowly ugliness that sister was talking about, Sister Rena was talking about, you see. No, we got to view the world turned upside down when all of us bask in the light of a dignity, hungry to be treated with a decency, no matter what color, what culture, what civilization, what sexual orientation, whether you are religious, non-religious, agnostic, or atheistic, like my dear brother Bill Maher, who I love deeply, because he's on the love train. He just doesn't have a cognitive commitment to God talk. I think he's wrong about that, but that's all right. I got much to learn from the brother. We got our brother written classic on Richard Pryor. Where's our Richard Pryor brother? There he is. There he is. Can't wait to read your book. It's our artists who oftentimes are the ones we have to be attentive to. That last line of Percy Shelley's great revolutionary pamphlet of 1821, A Defense of Poetry. Poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world. And he's not talking about versifiers. He's talking about all human beings who have the courage to muster their imagination and compassion to conceive of a different world, an alternative world, given the nightmarish world that we live in. You could do it through architecture, you could do it through painting, you could do it through music, but most importantly, you can make your life a work of art. You can make your life poetic. You can make your life prophetic. And you can make your life pietistic, understanding piety, not simply in a narrow, dogmatic, religious sense. Piety is the acknowledgement of your debt to those who came before and the way in which their love helped constitute you and the way in which their support and care for you constitutes a foundation for your move from your mama's womb to the tomb. So anybody who lacks piety has already fallen into this narrow American lie about being self-made. Oh, I did it all by myself, just me, my independent ego, my nomadic self. Oh, you birthed yourself too, I guess, too. Yeah, I worked it out 9 months. I won't tell you the secret. All of us dependent on antecedent mothers and fathers and grandparents and teachers and friends. And even when you're old as I am, when you have grandsons, I'm dependent on the younger generation. I need Lupe Fiasco to help preserve my sanity. I need Erykah Badu. I need voices from the dead like Janis Joplin and Carmen McRae and Sarah Vaughan. As I said on many occasions, I was a gangster before I met Jesus, and now I'm just a redeemed sinner with gangster proclivities. I need help. And in talking about these crimes against humanity, it could be against women, it could be with our prisoners, it could be with our brothers and sisters in Pakistan, and Somalia, and Yemen. And it can especially be with our poor and working peoples. Be with my trade unionists dealing with being demonized, especially teachers' unions, given the privatization of education. Standing with them. That's what is so necessary for the kind of love renaissance, justice renaissance, the shattering of the sleepwalking, the awakening, deep democratic awakening. Those Sly Stone call everyday people, mustering the courage to stand and straighten their backs up and be willing to organize and mobilize. And yes, some of us going to jail, and yes, some of us giving our lives. Now, martyrdom is not normative for the movement, but some must die. That is the depth of both the commitment, but also the threat to the status quo, no matter what color the elites are. And I know that's part of the controversy. People think I'm too hard on Brother Barack Obama, you know. Let the word go forth. I have a deep love for that brother. But love for me embraces not just respect and protect, but also correct. When you love folk, you respect them, you protect them, but you also correct them. If you come in, you lean toward Wall Street, correction is necessary. If you got a new prison industrial complex, and poor folk get caught with drugs on the corner, but not one executive of a Wall Street bank goes to jail. All that Wall Street criminality, market manipulation, insider trading, fraudulent accounting, predatory lending, and not one goes to jail. You say to yourself, who do you think we are? Born at night, but not last night? Do you think we don't see the hypocrisy and the mendacity and the criminality that's going unaccountable? Not one torturer is going to jail. Not one wiretapper goes to jail. But when it comes to whistleblowers, oh my God. Bradley Manning, you got to go. You in solitary confinement with no clothes on. John Kiriakou, you got to stay in jail. The only CIA brother connected with corruption and torture that exposed the corruption and torture, he's the one in jail. Something wrong. That's a Keith Sweat moment. Something just ain't right. We got to tell the truth. You got to have fearless speech, frank speech, plain speech. When the president does something that's progressive and prophetic, you support him and celebrate him. And when he does something that warrants criticism, you raise your voice and say, in the name of something bigger than me, in the name of something bigger than you, in the name of something bigger than America, it's called unarmed truth and unconditional love, which means every flag for me as a Christian is under the cross. People come running to me, oh, Brother West, where's your flag waving? I'm a cross bearer before I'm a flag waver. Oh, let's get that clear. Let's get that clear. And that's true in every nation where I am. I respect the flag when it tilts toward that rich legacy of Hebrew scripture. Do justly, love mercy, walk humbly with thy God. Then I'm with you, yes. But if you're refusing that high standard, then I will critically speak against you, not to bring you down, but to try to make you stronger in the eyes of especially those whose suffering is rendered invisible. That's why the new Jim Crow is one of the crucial crucial realities that constitute a catalyst for the kind of love renaissance, the kind of justice renaissance that we need. Let me stop now because we're going to have a good 20 minutes or more. I might be late for my plane, given the spirit in this room. Absolutely. So let's stop now and jump right into the question. Yes, my dear brother.
Who's doing the mics for us?
Oh, that's right. We got mics because we got the
we got the streaming.
That's right. We got, and I appreciate the radio and thing.
Here we come.
And what's the name of the radio? We should mention it first. What's the name of your radio station, brother? KPFK, yes. And give KPFK a hand. Give KPFK a hand.
Brother West, thank you again for coming again. I always appreciate you coming to our church. But let me ask you this. You mentioned the whole part about people not going to jail and bankers not going to jail.
Yes.
Can you just describe what must be the rationality for those folks that help launder money for the Mexican mafia, who the New York Times exposed not going to jail? I mean, I still don't understand it, and I'd like maybe you to expound on that, please.
Well, it's a very good question, though. One, we've got to ask the Justice Department. We see that Brother Lenny Brower just resigned after that magnificent Frontline television show, The Untouchables. He was head of the criminal division that was supposed to engage in enforcement, at least investigation, of our Wall Street brothers, primarily brothers, not sisters. And they're still brothers because they're human beings. They just have a greed that's out of control sometimes. And we all do. It's not like we're just pointing fingers. We all got greedy proclivities. But we need accountability. And when you're at the top, being treated like a king or a queen and an oligarch and a plutocrat with no accountability whatsoever, that becomes the new norm. See, that becomes the new norm. So the obsession is the 11th commandment, thou shalt not get caught. And when you do get caught, just pay off the money. Pardon? They pay a little small settlement, a small slice of the money they made, and then never have to apologize. You see, and these are the same folk when they talked about poor people. Poor people need personal responsibility, and when you fail, you got to pull yourself up by your own bootstrap because that's how America functions. You either succeed or fail based on what capacities and choices and judgments you have. But when they fail, $700 billion of welfare and $7.7 trillion of relatively free interest-free loans. Yet our students have to pay loans. Big loans with huge amounts of interest. But our bankers, the oligarchs and plutocrats of our day, like the kings and queens of 200 years ago, can get away with immunity. And that, to me, requires serious attention with love. Oh, no, it's got to be with love now. We're not talking about trashing nobody's mama, not talking about trashing anybody's humanity. We're talking about their deeds, their actions that generate consequences that are lethal for the weak and the vulnerable in our society. But we had enough. Yes, my sister.
Hi. I wanted to see what you thought about the immigration reform talks, especially in light of the increase in deportations under the Obama administration and the mass incarceration of immigrants in for-profit detention centers.
Yeah, I appreciate that question very, very much. So I'm just so glad we're having a discussion about it. Many of us were in Arizona years ago under the banner, Legalize Arizona. That was my banner, you know what I mean? It used to be Mexico, didn't it? That's what Ulysses S. Grant called the most wicked of any war of a great nation against a weak nation. That was the Mexican War of the 1840s. It was land grab, power grab, gangster activity all the way down. We got to remember that history. But I'm glad we're talking about it. For me, it's two things. One is that it's important that, for me, we don't engage in this dialogue with our precious Latino brothers and sisters simply because their numbers are increasing. I can't stand that kind of talk. It's a question of justice and fairness. I don't care how many numbers they have, whether the numbers are going up, whether the numbers are going down. We're talking about fairness. We're talking about justice. But see, in our minds, everybody got a little interest group. Oh, you got the blacks over here, browns over here, yellow over here, Jews here, Catholics here. No. That's politics in its most truncated Machiavellian form. But we're talking about what is moral, what is just, what is right. And for me, it has a spirituality to it. So I tell my Latino brothers and sisters, we're not concerned about you just because it's fashionable and faddish at the moment. We've been concerned all the way through. And my major question so far about the debate is, what do they mean by saying the whole thing's predicated by border security, especially with the use of drones? How do you achieve border security? What's the process? What's the end result? How do you measure it? How do you know you got enough border security for the comprehensive? That's the kind of questions we need to raise. But I'm so glad that we're talking about it, but it has to be cast not because the Latino vote supported so-and-so and the Republicans are in trouble because they lost the Latino vote. That's precisely the wrong kind of language. in talking about any issue of public policy. Even though I'm not naive, I know there's that political dimension to it, but we have to have countervailing voices that go deeper than just the interest group articulation. That's the crucial thing.
Thank you for being here. Is it me?
Yeah, you go right ahead.
Thank you for being here today. I, for one, need this infusion of hope and spirit and intellect. One of the places that I work is in the city of San Bernardino, which, as you may know, is bankrupt, and it has one of the worst home foreclosure rates in the nation, of course, in the state.
Oh, God bless you.
So as you talk about new Jim Crow laws, and as I think about social justice, to me, one of the most eminent things for us to be working on is how do we remedy this foreclosure crisis, particularly in the city of San Bernardino and in the state of California. And I was wondering what your thoughts were about the proposition that some have brought forth with the eminent domain and taking over the mortgages and giving them back to the people at reduced rates. Is that ethical? Is that social justice? Is that the right way to attack this problem, which I feel is just, it's really hitting the urban poor. It's hitting the poor, the disenfranchised very, very much. So thank you.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate the question. And we got 20% of our citizens wrestling with being underwater when it comes to this foreclosure crisis and this housing crisis. I mean, one is that from the very beginning, I had wholeheartedly supported the bailing out of homeowners over the bailing out of banks. I mean, that should have been a priority, the same as it should have been a priority for jobs with a living wage rather than the bailing out of banks, because our banks need to be decentralized, downsized, and do something that what they used to do, which is lend. I mean, it'd be nice if the big banks would start lending again rather than speculating and trading and on the casino-like market and so forth. So that, but secondly, I don't have the answer because I'm not an expert when it comes to the details. It's a matter of priorities. If we make it a priority to target the plight of our fellow citizens wrestling with foreclosure crisis and the housing crisis, in addition to massive public and including private investment, my hunch is, given all the creativity and imagination and intelligence in the United States far beyond myself, including yourself, that we'd have a whole host of ways in which we can ensure that folk are not going under and could once again be able to stand up tall and say this is a space that I can have some control over. So that it's a matter, for me, it's a matter of the priorities. But in terms of all the details, though, I don't want to stand here and act as if I'm some expert on the inside. But these budgetary crises in San Bernardino and other cities have so much to do, of course, with the money hemorrhage at the top. I mean, banks sitting on how much now? $3.4 trillion, $2.2 trillion offshore. And they're waiting for the next crisis. You know what I mean?
How do you explain that so many Christian churches and Christian leaders interpret God's word that government has a role in regulating the nation's bedrooms, deciding who gets married, yet Matthew 25, about the least of these, including the imprisoned, is one of the most known passages in the Bible, yet it seems like there's no role for government in that area.
That's a wonderful question, no, brother. No, we human beings, we're something else. We are really something else. I mean, this is why the Beckett's and the Chekhovs and the Harold Pinters and the Lorraine Hansberrys mean so much to us. We need our artists to remind us of the tragic comic character in which we find ourselves. It's just so difficult for us to love our crooked neighbor with our crooked hearts. It's just, Auden is right. W.H. Auden is right. And so you had to continually point out the hypocrisy. You know, even our deep fundamentalist Christians, you know, they want to be fundamentalists about everything other than love thy neighbor as thyself. Want to be fundamentalist about that one. Focus on that one. Focus on that one. Because I am a fundamentalist Christian. I'm a fundamentalist Christian to the core when it comes to the love thing. You see, when it comes to the love thing. The word of God versus the words of God. And the word of God was in Jesus. Jesus was all about the love. And they tried to crush him. They tried to suffocate him. But the love kept coming through. It just couldn't completely be eliminated and erased. And I come from a people who people gave up on. Ain't no way these black folk gonna keep producing love folk, given the levels of hatred coming at them to hate their bodies, hate the folk who look like them, hate who they are. And here come this love train, stronger than ever. Even stronger on the chocolate side, oftentimes than the vanilla side. And the vanilla brothers and sisters understood what was going on over there and said, ooh, I want to get in on that. That's some deep human stuff. We like that funk. We tired of this deodorized stuff over here. Oh, yes. And so the hypocrisy that you're talking about needs to be pointed out over and over and over again. Every generation, new challenges we've got to.
Yes, I teach middle school, and I teach middle school to the richest of the rich and the poorest of the poor. How do I bring this to the richest of the rich, to the poorest of the poor, to the Jews, to the Christians, to the atheists? I got to bring it to all of them.
Absolutely.
How do I bring it to all of them?
Beautiful question. No, because every child, no matter what color, is precious and priceless. The problem now is that we're in a situation where you all know that the children, the precious children, the top 1% are number one in the world. In which Finland as a nation is number one in the world. It's only when you introduce poverty and race we drop to 21. You see, so rich children get taught and poor children get tested. You see? Oh no, that's the truth. That's what we're talking about. You see, look at Chicago, 684 schools, right? 202 nurses for 684 schools. Only one of 4 schools have arts. So what is it like to be a precious young black brother or brown sister living in a hood? Guns, drugs, bullets. Go to school, you got metal detectors. Then you get there and you don't have music. You don't have arts. You don't have your imagination cultivated. You don't have your intelligence affirmed. You just test it, because the privatizing of our public schools is all about test. The teachers can't even engage in forms of teaching. And yet the well-to-do children, 14 in a class, told every day, whether it's true or not, you're brilliant. You say, sooner or later, I got to do something brilliant. Everybody else telling me I'm brilliant. People believe in you. You got self-confidence. Generate self-respect. So yes, our rich children, precious. They are just as precious as poor children. But the poor children are just as precious as the rich children. And they deserve so much better attention, treatment, especially birth to 6 years old. Birth to 6 years old, very early. And we need to target those years. Sorry to go on so long, go right ahead, though, but good to see you, though.
I'm also a history instructor at a college, and I'm interested in knowing your take of what's wrong with the society when the vast majority of those being incarcerated are African American and Latino males, men.
That's right.
Because what's wrong with the society when this is actually happening?
Well, it's real. One, of course, we know that, and Sister Michelle makes this clear, that we've got 13% of our black and brown brothers and sisters who fly high in the friendly skies frequently, who are involved in drug activity. 13% of white youth fly high in the friendly skies. 65% of the convictions are black and brown. That's what I mean when I talk about a criminal justice system that is in some ways criminal. It's deeply racist. Now, it's targeting the males, even though females growing very quickly. And this also includes our poor white brothers and sisters as well. I was just in Appalachia with Brother Tavis, smiling on our poverty tour just last week in Johnson City, meeting with the poor white youth. And they're escalating, but the intensity has been poor, black, brown, red in many ways too, but less urban spaces, males. Absolutely right. And there it's a matter of a sense of machismo, the posing and posturing, thinking that to be human is to be an urban outlaw because you've been treated as an outcast. When you're treated as an outcast, you think, in fact, the only way you can make it is to be tough. And yet all they really want is what all of us want, a little TLC. They just want a little tender love and care. That's what the young brothers need.
Does the society pretty much force, I'm going to say, this mass consumer system that you're supposed to go ahead and be defined male as a provider? So a lot of these guys engage in criminal activity that is ultimately to
What's all? No, I mean, it's true that, we live in a society where everything's for sale and everybody's for sale, and therefore it's the rule of money, especially big money, and therefore the definition of being male is to have big money, but also to be big and bad without being loving, caring, nurturing. Their conception of greatness is Alexander rather than Jesus. You see, Alexander the Great. Alexander, what did you do? I dominated more people than anybody in the world. I conquered more people than anybody in the world. Oh, that's your definition of greatness, huh? Let me introduce you to a great one who wasn't obsessed with just land and territory and mansion and trophy spouses and status and wealth and position, but was concerned about the quality of his service to the least of these and the depth of his love to everybody. He is greatness. Here's my father, Cliff West. Here's my mother, Irene West. That's greatness. Y'all don't know, but I could talk for hours. We ain't even got to Jesus yet. But we could go to Hillel if we wanted to. In the Judaic tradition, we could go to Buddha. We can go to Confucius. We can go to you all know all of the greatest examples in your own lives of what greatness really is on the ground in terms of love and service, you see. And that's precisely what our young brothers and sisters need access to. That's why I spend so much time with the hip-hop artists. The Brother Ali's, the Lupe Fiasco's, the Erykah Badu's, and others trying to keep this alive. But in the culture of superficial spectacle, it's all about glitz and blitz. We're going to say a prayer for Beyonce today, right? Because she's talented, but when Aretha sang the song, it was on the real side, wasn't it? Oh, yeah.
All right, we're going to take 2 questions and that's it, please. Your question and then your question, and then one answer.
Yes, Cornel, thanks so much for being with us. A couple of weeks ago, you were on a very provocative panel on ending poverty in America that was moderated by Tavis Smiley. Newt Gingrich was on the panel, among others. And some of the takeaways included Newt's promise to engage Republicans in reaching across the aisle to Democrats and kind of walking a mile in each other's shoes in their respective districts. Another follow-on was Tavis working with you to coalesce national opinion around the upcoming budget negotiations and the fiscal cliff that continues to be postponed but will certainly become active in a couple of months. Can you share with us what the status is of those efforts that you're involved in and ways that we can help support a more intelligent thinking around the financial decisions that are going to significantly impact the poor and significantly impact social programs?
Oh, appreciate just absolutely, very, very briefly, though, appreciate the question. I mean, Brother Tavis is always bearing witness, television, radio, and so on. That was our 3rd iteration of the poverty tour. That was the end of it. Well, actually, it was in the middle of it. I don't know where Sister Fudge, the new leader of the Black Congressional Caucus, whether she's been able to follow up with Brother Newt, but my hunch is both of them are going to continue to see whether they can work together. You saw my addition. I said when they get together, it would be nice if they come up with some strategies of trying to sever both parties from big money and the Wall Street oligarchs and corporate plutocrats, because both parties are tied in that way, very much so. You know, Democrats better than Republicans, but that's not saying a whole lot. Just not saying a whole lot, you know. Yes.
Hi. I work with high-risk youth, and lately I've been watching young adults and juveniles get horrendous sentences in the court system with gang allegations you can't fight, and I'm talking lots of years. So I'm sort of looking for hope or policy leverage on sentencing, and then the rights that they don't have once they come out as a felon that is truly the new Jim Crow. They can't vote, they can't get a job. Any hope or a direction to send us on sentencing?
Well, I mean, you constitute a living example of hope to the degree to which you refuse to give up and sell out and cave in. You continue to fight. You fight along with others. Always keep in mind it's never a question of quantity, it's a question of quality. Right? When Martin King called for the boycott in Montgomery, there were almost 100 black churches. How many black churches joined? 16. How come? The rest of them were scared. People get scared. And you understand why they're scared. And at that time, you end up lynched from a tree. But you say, no, I refuse to be scared. You're not scared. I can look in your eyes. I feel your spirit. You're not scared. I'm not scared either. But we need to hold on to one another because we can get crushed but not be defeated because we got bounce back. And you know folk who are bouncing back just with you. But in one of the chapters, though, in Sister Michelle Alexander's book, where she goes through various organizations that are doing things so you can connect on a national level as well as your local level, because things are beginning to turn. We've been struggling against the Atticus laws for the last 30 years, and they have begun to change now over time. We've been struggling against the death penalty for 30 years. Look at the shift that's taken place. The problem is we need revolutionary patience. You know what I mean? Because it takes a while. Just like the film you saw with Lincoln, right? They showed you 1865. They didn't go back to 1837 when the abolitionists first came together and they burnt down the building in Philadelphia, and they kept bouncing back anyway. They didn't tell you about Frederick Douglass had a bounty on his head and had to go to England. They didn't tell you about Lydia Maria Child. They didn't tell you about Angelita Grimke. They didn't tell you about Sarah Grimke. They didn't tell you about Sarah Douglas. All of those folk on the ground organizing, and then lo and behold, the elites finally say, we've got to respond after 30 years because we have a crucial issue we have to debate. Will these slaves remain slaves? It's like having a debate on child torture. So we need a big convention to debate whether child torture is a good thing or not. That's what happened in 1865. We got to have a big debate on whether these people remain enslaved or not. Please. Please. What are we talking about? I know we got to run. We got to run.
Cornel West!
Brother Francisco, go see you. Francisco, go see you, my brother.
Let's go to church.